St. Isaac Jogues and his companions were all from France, and they came to the new land in order to spread Christianity among the native Indians. Isaac Jogues was a very learned man. He taught English and literature in France. But had a desire to be a missionary. And he came to Quebec at first, North America, and worked among the Huron Indians. The Huron Indians and the Iroquois were often at war with one another. And ultimately, he was captured by the Iroquois while he was working with the Huron Indians. And they imprisoned him for 13 years. It was a long time he was imprisoned. And during that time, he was constantly tortured, physically tortured. Somehow, with some Dutch missionaries who had come, he managed to get back to France. They had burned off or cut off or chewed off his fingers on his hands so that he could not say Mass. As the priest in the old days, these two fingers, the priest would hold his hands like this because these two fingers held the consecrated host. And so they noticed this, and that's why they destroyed his hands. And Pope Urban VIII gave him permission to celebrate Mass even with mutilated hands, because he should not have been deprived of the precious blood of Christ. John de Brebeuf, René Goupil was tomahawked to death because he made the sign of the cross on the forehead of a child. Most of them were tomahawked to death or beheaded, but before that were extremely tortured. But they were men who had an incredible faith in God, and they only wanted to bring the love of Christ and the gospel to people who did not know him. Before they left there, 7,000 Indians were converted to Christianity. So their work was not in vain. The blood of martyrs is the seed of Christianity, and the blood of martyrs that was shed there. I made a retreat one time for a week up in Albany, New York, at the place where many of these men were martyred. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. There's just hundreds, thousands of pine trees. And when you walk through a forest of palm trees, there's no noise. It's completely silent because the pine needles falling on the ground make like a carpet. And it's unlike the rustle of leaves. It's very soft. And I remember walking there. It was a silent retreat, and I hadn't said a word for several days. And just walking in that area and then getting to the spot where Isaac Jogues was martyred and several of the others, I just felt their presence in a very wonderful way. It was very quiet. It was just the silence spoke loudly of the presence of God in this sacred spot where they were martyred. So that was just my experience with them, but I think I look back and see how they were willing to give their lives because so much did they love. They knew that the Indian people did not understand. They looked at the things we did, like making the sign of the cross and so forth. They looked at that as some kind of witchcraft. They didn't understand it. Once they did, they were able to embrace it. One of the martyrs, I think it might have been Charles Lamont, was tomahawked to death, and they threw his body into his chapel and then started it on fire. They really tortured them terribly. But from heaven now, certainly they are eternal peace with God. And when we read the gospel about how each human being is worth more than many sparrows, that's how they saw these human beings among the Indian people, God's creatures who Jesus died on the cross for. And ultimately they got that message to them. So we celebrate a great feast today in our own continent of these Jesuit martyrs who gave their lives to spread Christ's word to others. Let us stand and offer our prayers and petitions.